Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for BroadwayWorld. One of the most important groundbreaking musicals of the 20th century is Alfred Uhry and Jason Robert Brown's masterwork, Parade. Following a critically acclaimed, sold-out run this past fall at City Center's famed Encores, it has come to Broadway under the direction of Michael Arden and stars Ben Platt and Michaela Diamond. And I caught up with all of them here at the Lambs Club leading up to their opening night.
I always believed the parade would come back because it needed to and wanted to. And there have been 25 years of looking and hoping and waiting. And I never gave up on it. And here it is. It's unbelievable. It's wonderful.
Take me back to the beginning when you first wrote this with, of course, Hal Prince and Jason Robert Brown. How did Parade come about for you originally?
Well, I grew up in Atlanta. And my mother's uncle, my great uncle, owned the pencil factory where the tragedy happened. So I knew about it my whole life. And when I was a kid, I remember once my parents had some friends over, and I guess I was little enough to be playing on the floor and not listening. And somebody mentioned Leo Frank, and one of the guests got up and walked out of the room. Not talking about that. And I remember asking my grandmother about it, because my grandmother had been a social friend of Lucille and Leo Frank. And she said, oh, well, don't worry about that. So as soon as I was old enough, I got on the bus and went to the library and looked stuff up. And after my play, The Last Night of Ballyhoo opened, I think I was having lunch with Hal, who was a friend. And he said, well, why exactly were those Atlanta Jews so scared of being Jewish? More than other people were and all over. I said, well, I guess it's the Leo Frank case. He said, I know about that, but tell me what it was. So I did. He put his glasses on top of his head. He said, that's a musical. And I called my mother in Atlanta and said, guess what, I'm be doing a show with Hal Prince. And she said, oh God, it's Leo Frank, isn't it? The idea of it being a musical, at first I was a little stunned, but I realized how savvy he was to think of that, because it's so highly emotional, and it affects, it's like a ripple in a pond. It just grows and grows and grows and grows. So we were going to do it with Steve Sondheim. Steve had just written Passion, and so for about 2 or 3 weeks, he was doing Parade. Then he said, I just can't put myself through it again. And Al said, but it's okay, because my daughter Daisy's friend is great, and we're going to use him. And I thought, yeah, oh boy, we're going to go from Steve Sondheim to Daisy's friend. And I met him, and he was younger than my own children, and gangly, and I loved him right off. And we just talked for about 6 months. And I told, because he'd never been south, except maybe he flew over going to Miami, I guess, but he'd never been in the South. And I told him, we just talked about what it was like. And about 6 months in, he called me. I remember it was kind of snowy like yesterday. And I went over to his little apartment, and he played me The Old Red Hills of Home, and he played me the Streetcar Song. And I was just gobsmacked. I think I cried, and I'm not a crier. And he was working on spec all this time. And I called Hal, and I said, this is the real deal. And he had listened to everything I said, all the references. If you listen to The Old Red Hills of Home, it talks about Marietta, it talks about the Chattahoochee, it talks about Cobb County. He listened to me. To have a collaborator that really listens is a gift. I haven't had many. He listened, and he added his own juice, and we were off to the races.
Alfred knows this story, obviously, in his bones. And so the first time around was really, I felt like I was just downloading from Alfred, and trying to bring the story he wanted to tell to life. And I was also very conscious at the time, Alfred is a wonderful lyricist, which, we've forgotten because he hasn't done it for a long time, but I knew Alfred as a lyricist first. And so me trying to write lyrics to Alfred's story was always a little bit like, and add that there's the pressure of Hal Prince around, which was not a small thing. And then, 10 years later, we got back into a room with Rob Ashford, and we really tore the show apart in a lot of ways for the production at the Donmar. And that was a very different experience, because that was the two of us now coming at it as people who'd sort of been in the trenches together. And also I had done other stuff since then, and he had done other stuff since then. And we didn't have Hal standing over us. And so I felt like there was a beautiful way to meld our experiences. And then by the time this came up, this version is very much based on the Donmar production, but it is in a lot of ways very true to Hal's vision of the piece. So I feel like there's this constant, like, there's layers on layers on layers of every line in the show. And so watching it, I just get a little bit of, here's Brent Carver, here's Bertie Carvel, here's T.R. Knight, or here's Jeremy Jordan. And, in any given line, all those people are showing up, not to mention David Pittu, who did the tour, and, Ewan Morton. And it's like, there's all of these people, all of these Leo Franks, and that's only one of the 30 roles in the show. And all the songs have different lives, and I've performed all of the songs in various places and conducted it sometimes. So I just have this whole life with this show that started when I went to a meeting with Hal when I was 24, and I'm 53 years old. And so my entire professional life has been sort of bounded by Parade.
An incredible cast. I mean, talk about your new cast for this. I mean, Ben Platt, Michaela Diamond, what it's like having them as your new Franks.
I will say, I mean, first of all, it's the best sung production I've ever been part of. It's tremendous to hear the power of those voices. But it was also very important to me that Ben and Michaela are Jewish. And honestly, I've never had a Leo and Lucille who were both Jewish in a production before. And it really counts in a lot of ways for me in terms of how the story gets told. In terms of, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, in the last 5 years about what is authenticity and what is authentic casting and what does that mean. And in these past 2 years, with Mr. Saturday Night and with the movie of 13 and now with Parade, I've had the opportunity to see these pieces that were really conceived with Jewish characters be played by Jewish actors. And it is very affirming to me and, very significant to get to sort of see them take ownership of this story, which is in so many ways a Jewish story.